We welcome you to a fresh new hour of CBS Sports HQ. Haley Stetton and Amanda Guerra with you for the next hour. Amanda, football is so close we can almost reach out and touch it, but you will be in action this weekend.
Yes, I am getting on a plane tomorrow to head to Reno to get ready for SMU Nevada. Very excited about that. Fans already heading to Ireland.
Yes.
Florida State fans, Georgia Tech fans. They've actually sold out the stadium. I don't know if that's Irish fans or if that's Georgia Tech and Florida State fans, but they are known for traveling. That is your first game on Saturday, week 0 getting underway there. That game kicking off at noon Eastern. And then, yes, the game that I'll be on, so I'll just shout that out on CBS Sports Network. SMU, first season in the ACC. Many think they could be a dark horse taking on the Wolfpack. However, right now it is time for our SEC Super Preview. This is the conference, and we don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to, that has dominated the college football playoff since its inception. The most appearances, most wins, and most championships. So let's welcome in two of our experts here to get us ready for the SEC. 16 teams now. We have Brandon Marcello, Dennis Dodd here. Guys, I'm going to go to both of you on this. We're going to start with the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back college football champions, missed out on the playoff last year. And the big thing here is they get their starting quarterback. Not a lot of teams can say that. Brandon, your expectations for the Bulldogs, can they go back to the Natty and potentially claim it?
Oh, absolutely. They're supremely deep. They just bring in talent left and right, especially importantly in this era of the transfer portal. They're doing so through the high school ranks more often, and they're keeping them on campus and developing them. Quarterback Carson Beck, to me, is the best quarterback in the country right now. He's got the quickest release in all of college football, which is very important to that offense. And late last season, we saw his confidence get going. Really, in that second half comeback against Auburn late last season, it seemed like the team rallied around him. They started believing in him more. And boy, that offense exploded after that. And to me, Georgia is probably the team to beat in the country, not because of what they've done in the past, but because of, as I said, that depth across the offensive and defensive lines is incredible going into this season.
Yeah, Brandon's absolutely right. Georgia's loaded. I think even with their schedule, which is kind of tough, they will get to the playoff. They will get to the championship game. And I think with supreme talent and depth, I think they'll win it. I mentioned the schedule. They start off against Clemson. We know that week 1. But at Texas, at Alabama, at Texas, you know, they're sitting there with a team that could be 10-2 and not in the championship game. Will still be in the playoff with that type of schedule. They're not going to get blown out by anybody going on the road. They will be given credit by the selection committee for playing those games in conference now, not non-conference, except for the Clemson game. And they will get credit for that. I really love this team. Oscar Delp takes over at running back. He's not going to be what they had. I'm sorry, at tight end. They're not going to be what they had at tight end. They lose Ra Thomas. He was suspended or kicked off the team at that domestic abuse charge. But they're going to be as good as they were, almost as good as they were on defense 2 years ago. I think there's a chip on the shoulder for these guys. Kirby Smart. I think the Bulldogs thought they should have been in the playoff last year. That's another discussion for another time. So winning 3 in 4 years is the goal. And the last time that happened, I think the only time that happened was Nebraska in the mid-90s.
Georgia 42-2 over the past 2 seasons. That is just wild when you look at those numbers. When you saw the schedule there, I will say the game that I am most excited about, and also because it's new, the Georgia at Texas. We got to talk about the Texas Longhorns. We had Josh Pate on yesterday, and he's taken the Longhorns to win the SEC. A lot of people are going to be upset about that. I'm sure you guys saw it on social media. What are they look, they also lost 2 of their running backs, but there is a lot of depth on this team. Brandon, what are the chances the Longhorns can give the likes of Georgia and everyone else in the SEC a run for their money?
Well, Texas actually has a pretty favorable schedule. You look at week 2, they go to Michigan, but in the SEC, they don't have back-to-back road games on that schedule. In fact, they don't have back-to-back road games at all this season. They get Georgia at home this year, which is incredible for them. And then you look at what they just bring back offensively and defensively. At receiver, they can go 8 to 9 deep potentially. And Steve Sarkisian, the key for him this year is how he rotates those receivers. He is content on going 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 receivers every year. But he said this offseason that he's opened his eyes a little bit and he wants to rotate more of those receivers in and out because there's so much deeper there. So offensively, they're stacked. The one thing that really gives me a hesitation from picking them to go to the SEC championship game this year is because they lose, in my opinion, 2 generational defensive tackles who played next to each other last season and changed every snap in which they played. Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. Listen, they are stacked everywhere on this team, but losing those 2 guys, 2 generational type players for Texas, and they played side by side next to each other and changed every snap, that gives me some hesitation. But Texas obviously is loaded. The key here is the middle of that defense. And boy, I can't wait to see how much rotation, how much explosive speed they put out there at receiver.
Guys, in getting ready for the football season, look, we've talked so much about the Big Ten. They now have 18 teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan. We've talked about the SEC, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma joining the conference. We've not talked a lot about Alabama, which is strange. But, of course, they have a new head coach. Nick Saban is no longer there. Jalen Milroe, they're a quarterback. Dennis, I'm reading that he feels so much more comfortable now than he did a year ago. But what do we know? What do we need to know behind the scenes? What is happening at Alabama? What can we expect?
The fans and whoever follows Alabama right now is absolutely giddy about what Kalen DeBoer has done. He's not only fit in culture-wise, a guy from South Dakota, an accomplished coach, we know that, number 1 or number 2 on Greg Burns' list, whoever you choose to believe when he got the job, but has assimilated perfectly. When Greg Burns, the AD, went to Seattle, the first question he asked him before the interview is, do you want to be the guy to follow the guy? And his answer was, there's only going to be one person that ever replaces Nick Saban at Alabama. I want to be that person. I want to embrace this. And he has. We've seen lesser men get run out of town in Tuscaloosa, sometimes even before they coach a game. But so far, Kalen DeBoer has just killed it. And I point right to recruiting in 2025. Today on 24/7 Sports, they are the number 2 class in the class of 2025. And if there's anything that gets Alabama fans riled up and interested, it's recruiting. So they're doing well there. I think the quarterback thing is fascinating. I can't wait to see what they do with Jalen Milroe on offense. I think he's become more of a runner. With Jam Miller and Jason Haynes, they're going to be better at running back. They're going to be okay at running back. But I think they're going to have a 3-headed monster in that backfield. And defense, they're going to be right there. Amanda, the best place to be in a Power 4 conference right now in the playoff era, the expanded playoff era, is the number 3 team. And I think that's what Alabama is going to be in the SEC. You don't have to put your record out there. You don't have to risk it in the championship game. You can finish 9-3, which is what I think Alabama's headed towards, and they will be given every consideration by the selection committee to get in the bracket.
Dennis, really quickly, is it true Nick Saban has not been around a lot? I think we all expected him to be there all the time. And I read or heard somewhere that he's not really been around the facilities.
I don't think he has. I mean, he's got a place in South Florida. He's got his own private Gulfstream now. He bought one of those. And Brandon, we saw him at the SEC Media Days working his tail off. You're going to see more of Nick Saban than you ever had on TV, and ESPN's going to put him to work. He was going from 6 a.m. to Sports Center at night while he was there in Dallas. So maybe that's the case. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but he's kind of a resource for Kalen DeBoer, but he's certainly not looking over his shoulder.
Dennis, what about Ole Miss? Lane Kiffin, who is one for words, said that there has not been this much expectation around Ole Miss since the Kennedy era, according to him. However, on the Cover 3 podcast, and this is a school that hit the portal hard, a lot of people were torn on which way, especially when it comes to the win total set at 9.5, which way they're going, half and half, over, under. What about the Rebels, Dennis?
Well, when you've won 29 games in 3 years to tie a school record, when you have every starter back, at least on paper, the expectation, Amanda, has to be natty or bust. I mean, they have to get into that top 12, or I think it'll be a failure for Ole Miss. Maybe they're that fourth team in the SEC, obviously at large. Maybe they win the darn conference. I mean, maybe they go to the championship game. They're loaded offensively. They're loaded defensively. They're going to handle their own. Jackson Dart is just coming into his own as a quarterback. You know, Lane's going to say what Lane's going to say, but I think he wants to underplay it now because I think he knows these guys are really, really good, except they've got a cement ceiling above them with those three teams we just talked about, and it may not be any room for them. But I think in their heart of hearts at Ole Miss, the fans have to be thinking playoff or bust this year.
Playoff or bust for them. We know at least behind the scenes, Brian Kelly, LSU Tigers are thinking the same thing. Huge. You know, they had to replace Jaden Daniels. That was not easy. Garrett Nussmeier, when they have their first game of the season, it's just going to be a second start in his college football career. But Brandon, are we overlooking the Tigers and what they can do in this conference?
I think so for one reason, and that is Brian Kelly. You know, he goes into this year with the longest streak of 10-win seasons at 7 in all of college football right now. Okay. And in year 3, in his previous stops, that's when they, quote-unquote, have a breakthrough year. Sure, they had one in year 1 under him. I remember the job he did at year 1 in LSU. Let's not forget when he got there were 39 scholarship players there. He has built that program up a little bit here in high school recruiting. Year 3, yes. Without Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeier steps in at quarterback. Without Mike Denbrock calling the plays at offensive coordinator, now going to Notre Dame. But Brian Kelly feels very confident, very good about this team, buying into his culture. And he says it reminds him of year 3 at his previous stops. And let's just recap what he did at year 3 in his previous stops. Central Michigan, he had a 9-win year, won a MAC title. At Cincinnati, went undefeated in the regular season, won the Big East. And at Notre Dame, he went undefeated in the regular season and went to the BCS National Championship game. So Brian Kelly figures everything out in year 3 at all of his other spots. Why won't that happen at LSU, where he's arguably maybe got more talent this go around, despite losing everything in Jaden Daniels and a Heisman Trophy winner? But in this day and age, it seems like we go, well, we'll never see that again. Well, we had Joe Burrow at LSU in 2019, and then just 4 years later, under a different coaching staff, we had Jaden Daniels and that explosive offense trumping that. So I'm not saying that LSU is going to be breaking offensive records, but they certainly will be better than they were defensively last year. That's what held them back from the SEC title. They are going to be a team that will be contending in the SEC, and I believe just isn't getting enough play right now.
Brandon, take us to Rocky Top and the expectations there. Their quarterback, Nico, I do have trouble saying his last name, so I was like, oh, I wonder if he has a nickname. Hayden Hooker gave him the nickname The Chosen One. What is going on Rocky Top this season?
Don't set those type of expectations already.
That's
but
a
the
lot.
Guy's got
That's a lot.
It's a lot. He's got a monster arm, and any quarterback who's going to play in Josh Heupel's offense is pretty much going to be successful. You're going to put up big numbers. That's a given. And Nico Iamaleava, that's how you say it.
There you go. Thank you.
Is that he is just going to be a guy with the highest ceiling in all of college football at the quarterback position, in my opinion. He's someone that a lot of coaches there, and players for that matter, worry about his inconsistencies and the potential to turn the ball over. And Heupel's offense, you turn the ball over a couple of times as quarterback, that can spitball and really hurt your defense the way they like to play defense, and you could be in big trouble early. But Tennessee's got high expectations. You go ask the fans there in Knoxville, they believe they're going to be in Atlanta at the end of the year, and that no one's talking about them enough. They should be excited. They still got a lot to figure out there. The schedule's very difficult, as you see there on the screen. They have to go to Oklahoma and on September 21st for Oklahoma's first SEC game. They're walking into a hornet's nest there. And then, of course, near the end of the year, they've got to go to Georgia. So the schedules there is not necessarily conducive to win the SEC, but there is a path here with Nico and that ceiling to make some noise and maybe be a contender down the stretch. And for that matter, obviously a playoff team potentially.
One more team we're going to talk about here. We got to talk about Auburn, year 2 under Hugh Freeze. Dennis, listening to the Cover 3 podcast, the guys were saying 2025 may be the year for Auburn, that this year they really looked at recruiting. They didn't really hit the transfer portal at all. So maybe we're looking in the future. What are your expectations for the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, not good. Midland to I guess below 500 for Auburn this year. They went 6-7 last year, obviously, in Hugh Freeze's first year. But there's just not much buzz around the programming. You guys know how do you win in the SEC? You got to be strong in both lines. That's your foundation. Well, they're talking about the passing game at Auburn, and it was putrid last year. It was last in the SEC. Peyton Thorne returns. He's less than a 60% passer. But the way they address it, no, not by going into the portal and getting a quarterback, by going and getting 4 freshman receivers. Now, I expect them to have impact right away. I think it's dicey. They did get Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. He's a veteran. He will contribute. But you got to be able to run the ball. You got to stop the run. And you've got to match up with teams in the trenches in this league. Hugh Freeze is going to continue to call plays. That's always been, that's a week-to-week thing, it seems like, going back to Gus Malzahn at Auburn. And the first team they lose to that they shouldn't, and that will happen this year, you're going to say, who are you going to give the play-calling duties to? So some of the same old stuff at Auburn, below 500. And, yes, I agree with the cover 3 guys. Look to 2025.
All right, 2025 Auburn fans, which means you can just enjoy tailgating a little bit more. You don't need to be so invested in the game. Have fun at those games. Guys, let's do some bold predictions. And I will preface this by saying yesterday we had on Tom Fornelli, Chip Patterson to preview the Big Ten. Their bold predictions were terrible. They were not bold. They were lame. So I hope you guys are better. Brandon, I'll start with you. Your bold prediction for the SEC.
Well, to me, the SEC is not going to win the national championship this year, and they're not going to do so in back-to-back years for the first time in a decade. There are just way too many great teams in the Big Ten this year that are going to beat up on each other this year, and that's going to prepare them going into the playoff. I really like Ohio State. I really like Oregon this year. I think the SEC is once again going to miss out on winning a national championship for back-to-back years for the first time since 2013 and 2014. And also, I'll just throw in a bonus here, bold prediction. Florida finishes with a winning season.
Oh.
How about that?
That is bold. Okay, let's go. Dennis, what about you?
All right, Brandon, you stole my thunder, but I'll go one better. I wasn't going to pick SEC win the national championship, obviously first time in 10 years. But I say they get 4 in, and that's going to upset the apple cart when you consider you've got 5 guaranteed, those 5 conference champions, highest ranked guaranteed. So what's that? 2 or 3 more from the SEC getting in there. And yes, I'm counting Ole Miss, as I said before. But 4 get in from the SEC. They make a lot of noise, but they don't win the national championship. And by 2026, guys, because of all this, we have 16 teams in the playoffs because Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey need to get all their teams in. They've got to have all their teams in. It doesn't matter if they win it all or not. 16 by 2026.
Are y'all going with Ohio State then, or is there some other weird, bold prediction that we have?
I'm going with Oregon to win the Big Ten.
No. I'm talking about national championship.
I know, but I'm not sure Oregon can win the national championship this year. I actually kind of like Ohio State to win the national championship, despite maybe losing 1 or maybe even 2 games in the regular season this year. But to me, Oregon's kind of a big team to watch this year. They're going to upset a lot of people in the Big Ten, and the gray hairs there used to seeing Ohio State and Michigan on top, and that's going to be a storyline to follow when we get into the playoff as well.
All right, Dennis, we don't have time for your answer because Brandon took that and ran with it. So we're going to find out later on in the season. Things are just getting started. It is week 0. Taking a look at the teams that our experts think will win the SEC. Everybody going with the Georgia Bulldogs, except, as mentioned, Josh Pate taking the Longhorns.